Coming up on episode 50 of Fresh Freedom, the Iran-Israel war has the neocons foaming at the mouth. Chris Bedford joins us to break down how the regime change and nation building have been a brutal, failed blueprint for decades. Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast, featuring freedom-focused representatives who are fighting for conservative values and defending your constitutional rights. I'm Nate Lucas, joined by Representative Eric Burleson from Missouri's 7th District, and our special guest is Christopher Bedford. Mr. Bedford is a senior editor for politics and Washington correspondent at Blaze Media. Gentlemen?
Thanks for having me. This is great.
I'm honored you're on. I get your emails all the time. Oh,
that's fantastic. Well, thank you for reading. Thanks for checking in.
I think it's the most informative morning newsletter brief. If you just want, you just lay it out there so well, and you're not afraid to poke at the Republicans a little bit.
You need poking from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you think that. I mean, for years, I moved here in 2004 and got involved in news media in 2010. And the only shows in town originally were Playbook with Mike Allen. And then he kind of, after a long career, decided that he was going to have semi-retire. And the kids he handed it off to just weren't giving you anything that was really necessarily worth reading at all. And all the places are trying to cover Capitol Hill. It's just, what does Democratic leadership think? Or sometimes, what does Republican leadership think? It's never what's actually going on.
They're left-leaning.
Yeah.
Yours is definitely right-leaning.
Yes, mine is a little more opinionated. At least let people realize what they're reading. Like, yeah, I've got some opinions, but other writers lie about it. So just be more open.
I just find that yours, though, I think that some of these other publications that you get in the morning, they're so DC-based that outside of this little bubble, like, who would enjoy reading the nitty-gritty, almost TMZ details of Congress? Yours is a little bit more thought out.
Well, thanks. That's what I'm aiming for, because most of our readership is all around the United States. Most of the people who care around the United States. I mean, the lobbyists have their special memberships to Political Pro or whatever that they get to expense. But there's no need to read that. Just try to figure out what's going on. Try to figure out who's lying to you. Try to figure out who's actually pulling the strings here, and let Americans know, and don't overwhelm them. People don't want really long newsletters. I mean, when's the last time you got all the way down to the birthday section in Playbook or something? These things have gotten way too long, way too in the weeds, and the reporters really do think that this is like the most important thing in the world. And it's not. It's such insider baseball. It's just a waste of time.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Like, when you go home to your district, do you hear what the inside gossip is of DC? Not at all. It's totally separate.
I don't even care.
No, they don't. Yeah, not at all. Not whatsoever. In fact, a lot of times, I'm on Capitol Hill, we're focused on what's happening in the House. You kind of miss what's happening on the Senate side, or what the president is doing. And when you emerge from our shell or cave, and a lot of times the people back home, they've been paying attention to, broadly speaking, what's going on. So, they're not really focused on the inner workings of the interplay between members.
And I know you have to do that. Congressmen have to do that. Senators have to focus on their interplay, their relations, this committee, who's backing this, which bill you're going to back. But it's hard for a lot of folks who have actual full-time jobs and families. They're not going to follow that, and they're less interested in that. They're just going to want to see results. And it's cool to be here at CPI and other places where the whole idea is to bring House and Senate together to talk to each other, to actually have conversations in a way that doesn't happen as often as you'd think.
Freedom Caucus, we meet a lot with a group of senators.
Yeah.
That happens on a weekly basis at least.
Well, you could see the results of that in the reconciliation bill. I don't think there would have been a reconciliation bill remotely this far along if the Freedom Caucus hadn't released a budget. Said, all right, well, we're going to do this first. And then everyone had to scramble. It's like, okay, well, we'll do our jobs too.
Yeah, they couldn't be embarrassed by us, right? Because they weren't producing it. So when we did, it was suddenly you saw leadership,
Okay.
like suddenly, oh, God, we better get one out.
And then there was assault guys. So Freedom Caucus didn't even get in trouble. It's all the Republican focus over the negotiations was, well, these SALT guys are causing trouble. It was the smoothest sailing I've seen in years.
I don't like just knowing what was going on behind the scenes. I wouldn't call it that smooth. It might have looked smooth on the surface.
Yes.
But
Still waters run deep.
the waters were pretty choppy there.
Everyone caught a few strays, so to speak.
That sounds like a good subject for a newsletter. Behind the scenes.
Well, I will get a little more into the one big beautiful bill and its current where it's at in the Senate in just a bit. But the last 2 weeks have been a whirlwind with the escalation between Iran and Israel and the United States dropping two bombs. I guess 2 questions here. One, you're in the trenches. What is it like to kind of follow the news and everything at a global escalation like this? And then from your perspective, kind of covering it, knowing what we went through in 2003 and 20 plus years of a forever war, the appetite seems to be way gone for that.
Yeah, I thought was interesting is that now that I'm here, and it makes sense, but like it's weird to me that this is happening and I'm finding out about the stuff as everybody is. But if you think about it, they're not going to let members of Congress know what they're getting ready to do because you've got Ilhan Omar, you've got all of these people who are not to be trusted with that information. So they kind of have to be very limited and judicious with who they're going to, entrust what their next steps are on military actions. And so, but I think that the War Powers Act kind of lays out. While I don't know that it's constitutional, first of all, I would say, but it does kind of lay out to the president that whatever you're going to do, it has to be an imminent threat, and then Congress, you got 60 days for Congress to respond and approve or do whatever Congress is going to do. I think what was interesting is Trump gave Iran 60 days, right? I wonder if he picked that because he kind of wanted to, establish a baseline to kind of remind Congress that you had 60 days as well, even though
that's interesting.
So I wonder if that's one of their thoughts is at least to set that up to create the argument, or at least put the president on a better footing.
Yeah, that would make sense. And you're right. He has to be careful because this has got implications for the MAGA political movement. Some of the biggest voices are really divided on this. You wouldn't know that Mark Levin and Tucker Carlson probably supported the same president in 2024 based on their back and forth on Twitter and other places. And there's a lot of mean words flying around. So both Democrats and Republicans, though, as I worry for Israel, are really tired of war in the Middle East. And this is the first time that you've seen the Democrats have completely turned. You have people like Chuck Schumer who are clinging on with white knuckles to try and keep the party from going full pro-Hamas, like a lot of the activists want. And then you go to the Republican side, and for the first time in my lifetime, there's split of people saying, listen, we do support Israel, but I don't want another war. And this sounds like their fight, not ours, which you haven't seen before. So if it does go wrong, and there's promising signs right now, but if the United States has to get more and more actively involved, that could be a threat to the American-Israeli relationship as well as to the GOP and the Democrats who are trying to maintain sanity.
To me, this reminds me of what happened with when Trump bombed Soleimani, right? Iran was incensed, and in order to save face, they had to strike back. But if you remember, they launched missiles at like an empty area.
And they did it again, yeah.
And that's what they just did. And then it's like over, right? So to me, that they just telegraphed that they're done. And they basically just tapped out. That was their way of tapping out.
And the hope is that is followed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the more hawkish generals who probably really do actually want to exact a toll in the United States. The people who've made it their lives to have these bunkers. And now there's an attack inside of Iran. They want to say, let's really lash out. We're being weak. But they can't control their skies against the Israelis. They could never control their skies against the United States. So it's obviously in their best interest to just negotiate out of this with the United States. But I don't think Netanyahu wants peace. Not yet. This is something he's been cooking up for a long time. He's beat the whole Shia crescent from Hamas to Hezbollah to Syria. Now he's at Iran. And Iraq's just being real quiet right now. They got a lot of friends in Iran, and they're just sitting on their hands, saying, like, acting like they don't know anyone in the room. But the Iranians, I think Netanyahu's going to want to put some more hurt on them before he's done. A lot more hurt.
I think Trump wants peace. He's
Definitely
tweeting out right now that he wants peace.
He declared peace after the bombings. There's
Yeah,
no war.
Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire.
Really?
Oh, for real? Is this just breaking?
This is just breaking. So
That's fantastic.
he
See,
can-
I knew. Even over the weekend, I was telling people at church when they were like, people were kind of a little nervous. I said, "This is playing out exactly like it did with when he
Hit Soleimani.
hit Soleimani." And here we are. I mean, if this is really honestly a huge, if it's done, this is a huge success for President Trump. If you think about it, the guy deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for what he's accomplished in the Abraham Accords, and then now to basically take the weapons out of the hands of Iran will bring peace to the world for a long time.
Yeah, as long as the supreme leader can keep control. Because there's got to be a lot of, I mean, if I was an officer in the Iranian military, I'd be sitting there thinking, we are incredibly vulnerable. We couldn't defend our skies from F-16s. We were bombed in our air bases. We were embarrassed. Our allies are all gone or wiped out or degraded. And then we just got so publicly embarrassed by Donald Trump, who of course is a much bigger, more powerful country. Like, the only way to keep that from ever happening again is to get a nuke. So there's got to have to be some tension in Iran. We'll never know.
I mean, I don't think it's our problem. Some of the people talk about regime change. At the end of the day, like, whoever's going to replace him is going to be just as bad, probably.
Or worse. Or, this
I
is
don't
the enemy
know.
we know.
I don't know how you get worse, right? Somebody that wants to build a nuke and destroy, completely obliterate. I don't know how you get worse.
Just the willingness to use it, I think. Because they've never, like we just saw, they hit empty bases. They warned the United States. They hit places that the intent was not mass casualties. They're in retreat, and there are definitely some people in there who just want to be meaner. Like, want to cause mass casualty events. I mean, my wife was calling me the other day saying, should we drive to our July 4th destination instead? And it's like, no, I don't want to drive you and the baby and the toddler or the 9-year-old 18 hours. Don't worry, darling, DCA is safe, but I understand.
You did see, though, as all of this was unfolding and it was happening quickly, the neocon thirst is still very evident. I mean, you had former Trump administration officials seemingly on Fox News every day pushing war and regime change. You still have folks, I understand, today on the Senate floor that were advocating for regime change. It seems a little odd that people like that would be out on television expressing opinions that seem to counteract what President Trump campaigned on, which is America first and peace through strength.
Yeah, I think that, like, I don't care. To me, I think that it's not our job. We should not be getting involved at the end of the day. It's as long as they are relegated to rocks and sticks, they're not really going to be able to do much harm. And that's what I think our posture should be towards Iran, is that, look, it's like the way that whenever my wife and I were raising our daughters, we took a parenting class called Love and Logic. And they basically kind of teach you that when you're a child, your kids are fighting and one kid hits the other over the head with some like toy, then you say, okay, you just lost your right to have that toy. That toy is now taken, right? And
Like
that
forever? We bunker bust that toy?
to the child, it feels like forever, right? But at the end of the day, I think that's what we're telling them is on a global scale, is like, you've lost the right to demonstrate that you can control, that you should have the ability to have some of these things.
Yeah, October 7th was such a strategic error by Iran and its proxies that they put themselves in such an absolute world of hurt. But of course, I mean, the neocons are going to neocon. That's where their backing comes from. It's like what they truly, deeply in their hearts believe. And the Senate is just, it's just reliably 15 years behind the rest of the country in terms of its political appetite. So they're never going to be exactly on the ball with what's changing, what's going on, what the mood of the country is. It's just not. It doesn't seem to be the Senate's nature. So that's not surprising.
And the polling numbers on this, now you got to look at how the polls were phrased, but by and large, particularly on social media, where you could make the case that it's a younger audience than, say, Fox News. I think the average viewer of Fox News is somewhere around 57 or 58 years old. The younger generation, and you had some of this polling data in your brief this morning, clearly suggests that forever wars are just not popular. People we don't want that anymore at all.
No, not at all. I think the older generation watches Fox News, more clearly remembers the Cold War. I mean, President Trump kind of grew up in the 50s. So 50s and 60s, the height of the Cold War. He remembers the imminent threat of a nuclear attack. This was something he seriously considered and thought a lot about. And I don't really know that many people here in Washington who wanted the forever war. No one I really associate with or talk to on a daily basis. A lot of people were really nervous, but all my relatives, grandma, my parents, my aunts and uncles, who just they watch a lot more Fox Primetime. They couldn't wait. Like, we have to destroy, we have to eliminate. It's like, whew, that's don't you guys remember Iraq? It didn't exactly go that great. Libya's not doing great. Afghanistan's not doing great. Never was going to do great, but it seems like we ought to have learned a few lessons. And this could be something that President Trump, the trick to not doing regime change is don't do regime change. The trick to not doing nation building is just don't do it. And everyone's going to tell you have to do it. And he just ignores it and doesn't. It's a targeted strike, overwhelming force, shock and awe, but without what came after George W. Bush's shock and awe. It's just without the invasion, without any of that, and then walk away.
And to the Iranian soldiers, he made the message clear. I didn't attack you. Just as a reminder, right? In his speech, he said, we didn't attack the soldiers, the people. We went after the facilities.
Yeah, the capabilities, and warned them, apparently. So now if they have uranium driving around in trucks or they're looking for another place to find it, the Israelis are going to find that.
If you go back to like 2003, when the United States invaded, how much, you guys were obviously having a little more perspective on this, but how much of George W. Bush's domestic agenda got derailed because we were in the Middle East? I mean, there were talks, at least some of the stuff that I was listening to, he had ideas to reform Social Security, a lot of things that were getting out of hand, and instead it all went, straight to the Middle East war.
I don't recall. I'm trying to think back what his domestic agenda was. I think that's a good point that it was kind of dropped, but I think he was trying to privatize Social Security. Is that right?
You wanted the lockbox.
Right. That was Al Gore.
It was Al Gore in the debate against him. Remember the SNL skit? We got to put it in a lockbox. I remember the SNL skit more than I remember the actual debate.
Right now, cue Alan. He's going to play that clip. Lockbox.
He's going to put it in there.
Let me begin by saying that under my plan, the surplus would not be wasted, but protected in what I call a lockbox.
Lockbox? That's a fantastic idea. I love that idea.
Oh, thank you.
I remember, it's been a while, but George W. Bush ran in a primary against men like John McCain, and he was someone who was not an interventionist. His thing was we need to focus on the United States. His thing was we need to focus on education. We need to focus on housing, which was one of his more disastrous policies. It ended up with the housing crash and everything else. He wasn't a huge reformer, but he was supposed to be a return to peacetime republicanism as opposed to wartime Republicans, which he had. Ronald Reagan obviously went through, and then H.W. Bush at the dismantling of the Soviet Union, who was one of the last Republican presidents. And he wanted one that was just, we're going to focus on peacetime and prosperity and the economy. I don't remember him having any kind of far-thinking agenda that would actually have changed the trajectory of the United States or addressed any of the problems that were coming economically. But it was a much more humble agenda, and that completely was hijacked by the war on terror.
And right now, I mean, the United States, it feels like we have so many issues that need to be fundamentally addressed domestically. Mm-hmm. You just hate to see any of that momentum get derailed whatsoever. So
That's right.
hopefully we're on a better path. Just the last thing on this, Tom Homan over the weekend expressed, concerns. I think DHS raised the level of threat in the homeland to an escalated level because of all of the 20+ million illegal aliens that came through during the Biden-Harris administration, including Iranians, who we don't really know much about, but they are in our country. And so if this were to escalate, you would have to think that something would happen on the homeland that would stir up, an additional response. I hope that's not the case, but...
So my question is, were they not ever, if there were terrorists that do have a plan they're going to execute on, how does this change their plan, right? Because Iran has made it clear, like, they hate the United States, we're the Satan, right? That they're going to do whatever they can. If there were sleeper cells that he activated, the truth is, like, he was calling for jihad and he was calling for any Iranians to attack before, right?
Remember they tried to blow up Cafe Milano in Georgetown? It's like an Iranian plot to kill the Saudi ambassador to the United States in Cafe Milano. They're going to blow the whole place up. Now, I know Cafe Milano is overpriced and kind of stuffy, but you're not supposed to blow up restaurants in the United States. That's the kind of thing that... So, yeah, it's possible. Certainly, if they coulda, you woulda, and they haven't so far. And we haven't had a serious terror attack in quite some time. But there are those small events. I'm going to drive my truck into a July 4th parade. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring a gun to my office picnic or something. And those are things you always have to worry about with unhinged people, and just the reality that evil can touch you if it wants to, if it's determined.
I'm actually more worried about the left in America right now.
Yeah, it's extremely violent.
They're extremely violent. And I think that there's a lot of people that have lost their mind. Like, Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing for some of these people. And I'm actually pretty worried about where they're going.
Yeah, it seems like the wild protests have really simmered down, despite the Democrats just trying to get out there and say, come on, guys, we're going to do the whole riots again, right? The Summer of Love.
Yeah, I'm not getting death threats from people that are Iranian. I'm getting death threats from the lefties.
That's wild.
Well, one thing in common, I suppose, between the Ayatollah and the left is they all chant death to America. I mean, it happens in every major city in America.
It's so weird.
It's not healthy.
Even the people that are here, that are enjoying a job in the United States, they still want to destroy this country.
I saw on Twitter, Free Palestine is Allahu Akbar for people with student debt. It's just kind of a different little version. Isn't it weird how our leftists hate America? Like, the communists, the Soviets didn't hate Russia. They were nationalists. The lefts in the major left-wing revolutions in every country before this, they were total nationalists. They just didn't like that regime or that state. They wanted to take it out. And the communists were Russian nationalists until the very end. Still are, if you remember Putin's KGB ties. But you don't see that at all with the American left. It's unique to us.
Before we break off, I want to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill. Right?
Yeah.
So from the outside looking in, where do you see things? And it is like the fog of war right now. It's a moving target. A lot is happening. They're going through the bird bath right now, which is a complicated Senate process. And some of the things are getting thrown, some of the good stuff's getting thrown out. I don't see the bill passing. I don't think conservatives in the House are going to support it. I don't see how I can support it right now, the way that it's coming out of the Senate. What are you hearing? What are your readers?
People are worried. People I've been talking to are really worried about what the Senate parliamentarians doing by stripping out so much of this important aspects of the bill, the cost-saving measures, the different things that Congress should obviously be able to do. Senator Mike Lee's REINS Act, which he tailored carefully over weeks to make it work with the process. So, that whole thing is just ejected now. There are people talking about whether or not...
I don't see how Mike Lee votes for this.
Yeah, you're starting to lose. If you cut out all the stuff that made conservatives come to the table, that puts them in a dangerous spot. And you had the Speaker Mike Johnson telling the Senate, this is a very carefully crafted bill. But like you said, the senators weren't paying attention to what the House was working on for weeks. They decided, we're going to draw our own thing after they got it. They largely kept to the rules. It seemed like Senate Finance worked closely with your colleague from your delegation on Ways and Means, and they seem to be doing well. But I'm interested to see what's the parliamentarian going to do to the Senate Finance stuff, the tax stuff that she's reviewing today. You keep this up, what they did to the banking committee, then you're not getting the votes in the House or the Senate, and it needs to be retooled. Or Senator J.D. Vance needs to say, well, you're actually an employee of the Senate, not in charge of the Senate. I'm in charge of the Senate, and we're going to allow this to continue. And that could, but that's, of course, people are going to say, that's a precedent.
Yeah, that sets a different precedent, and the Dems will do that to us later on, but
They might anyways.
they're going to anyways, right?
Then you lose Murkowski and Collins.
We always play by we're like the British, the Republicans are like the British, right?
In the Revolution?
During the Revolutionary War, whenever the Americans were using guerrilla warfare, the British were like, you can't do that.
You can't shoot our officers.
Oh, that's not, right? That sets a new precedent, right? But that's what the Republicans, that's what we do. That's what we're really good at, is holding ourselves back and then watching the left go crazy.
It just seems we've done full episodes on repealing elements, the green energy scam and the Inflation Reduction Act, which every single Republican probably campaigned on, and now they're getting cold feet when it comes to, bringing back those different subsidies, or parliamentarians shot down illegal aliens receiving food stamps. I mean, how?
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that one bit. Why would that be?
And how is that not, like, that is a financial move. Like, you can't tell me that the federal government paying for people that are illegal to receive food stamps and us changing that doesn't have a budgetary impact. That's absurd. It's really absurd.
Yeah, and Mike Lee, I think he switched his thing to any regulation that's estimated to cost over $10 million or $1 million, which would have a budgetary impact. This seems like massive overreach by the parliamentarian, and it could set them up for conflict.
Is there, how much discretion, because I've heard it said that the parliamentarian generally is on a leash from the Senate leader. Mm-hmm. Is that, how much of that is true? That Thune is actually has control over what the parliamentarian says?
That is true. I mean, she's an employee, not in charge. She just doesn't rule the Senate. The Senate can continue. It's supposed to be the wise oracle that you consult and you follow the rules, but there have been examples of past parliamentarians being fired or the job being switched out for someone else. It's just, I guess it's going to be a question of how much Thune and the Republicans are willing to blast through the precedents that we generally have of she's served under both administrations and she's just giving rules and making calls and being a referee, and people don't always like the referee. But like you said, how could government expenditures on food stamps for illegal aliens not be a budgetary matter? Mm-hmm. It seems like that fits really firmly under these arcane rules that they've established. It's all about rules, though. Same thing with the House of Representatives, more so with the Senate, but there's so much precedent. There's so many different rules of who needs to approve what first and how it's allowed. And it's usually generally an important system, but if it's weaponized against the American people, that's a problem.
Didn't, rules were made to be broken, right? That's
my poor parents, they still don't like getting phone calls at 1 a.m. It's been a long time since it was the police and I was a kid, but
Mr. Bedford, I'd hope please come back sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Congressman, thank you.
Thank you.
Fresh Freedom, be sure to follow their official accounts on X at CBedfordDC and at Rep Eric Burleson. You can catch Fresh Freedom on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, X, and Rumble. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Stand strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for freedom.